Hello guys, you're welcome once again to my channel, and in the last video we basically designed our form here, the login, the registration for both the user and the admin. So I could just go back to the home page and I could move to user, register user, login user, back to home page. I could get into admin, register admin, login admin. Alright, so in this video we're going to be looking at the user login and registration. If we are not able to get this done in one video, then we'll definitely shift it or move it over to another video. But before I begin the content of this video, all right, so subscribe to my channel. Just hit the subscribe button right here. That does me a whole lot of good. Okay, now so let's get into the content of what we have. And now I'm going to go into the register view. So let's go to the register view for users. All right, so we're going to begin from the register view for users. So basically in the register view, that is where we have our form. And so we want to basically find a way to be able to get the inputs that the user is going to be entering within our form. And that is where we are going to make use of useState. All right, so useState is one of the React hooks function, and it just basically is used to help us manage our state. All right, so another React hook function that you can use to manage your state is actually useReducer, but useReducer is a little bit more primitive. Although whenever you want to do like managing complex states, you could use your useReducer. But for this video, we're going to be using useState. But not just that, we're going to be using useState. We're going to be using our custom hooks, which we built in the previous videos before now, which we call the useFormField. So if I go to helpers, right? Helpers hooks from input, yes. You can see here we have this function called useFormField. So we're going to be using our useFormFields. Our useFormField takes a field and then it sets the value, and it makes sure that the value is being set when an event is triggered. All right. So now let's get back to our register view within our user. And right in our register view, we are going to start off by importing our useFormField. useFormFields, and this is going to come from. So let's just go into our helpers and our hooks from input. All right. So right now we have imported our useFormFields. The next thing we want to do is we want to begin to define the values of our states. So in order for us to do that, we would have to define them within our functional based components. I'm going to say useState, and yep. So I'm going to call this fields, and I'm not going to call this set fields. All right, I'm going to call this handle field change. And for the initial state here, our initial state is actually going to be an object, and we're just going to pass the following: the name. Next up is going to be the email. Next up is going to be the password, and next up is going to be confirm. All right, so we have the name, the email, the password, and confirm password. All right, so we have defined our states in here. What I can do next is within each of our fields which we want to get the input. Remember, right in our hooks from input, we are mapping the ID with the value, and we are mapping the value to the state. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come right in here, and I'm going to give this an ID of name, and I'm going to give this a value. Our value is going to be fields.name, and also I'm going to give this an event. So anytime there is a change event, we want whatever is the value here to be updated basically to the current value within the name text form input. So in our onChange, I'm going to call handle field change. All right, so I'm just going to copy this in right now, and for email, we are going to change this to email fields.email and handle file change. And I'm going to scroll down here and do the same for password. So fields.password. Right here, we're going to have password, and we have handle field change and confirm password. This is going to be confirm, right? So fields.confirm, and yep, we have handle field change. So right now we have successfully been able to set the values to be our state. I'm going to save this right now, but before I head over to my browser, I'm going to get right in here, and I'm going to prevent the default behavior from the browser. Basically, I'm going to log to the console our fields, which is our field state. So if everything works as expected, we should get the value of every single thing we have entered within our text fields. And I'm getting back here, and we have an error saying useState is not defined, and that is because we are not supposed to use useState here. Oh boy. We're supposed to use our custom hook, which is called useFormFields, and now that should do. Yep, we have this. So I'm going to go to not admin. Actually, we're starting with user, and we're starting with the registration part of user. And let's just get to our console, and now let's enter a name here of say Pascal, an email of Pascal or whatever at gmail.com. Let's make our password and confirm password. Now if I click on this, you can see don't save. It returns for us an object that contains the confirm, the email, the name, and the password, all within our state. If I were to get rid of one of these and I clicked on this, you can see it tells me please fill out this field as the power of HTML5. So because of the HTML5 required, we can't submit this form without having this field. All right. Okay. So now that we have done this, the next thing we're going to look up is if I were to enter a password that does not match this, it will still submit this form. And we don't want that to happen. We want to ensure that both the password and the confirmed password are the same strings. And so for us to do this, we'll have to head back into our application. And within our application, I'm going to create a new function here. And that function is going to be called check password match. And our check password match is going to take two parameters, our password and our confirmed password. And it is going to say if our password is not same as our confirmed password, then we want to return true. All right. Otherwise, we want to return false. We could still shorten this. Just shorten this. We could say password not equal to confirm, then true. If password is not equal to confirm, true. Otherwise, false. And then we can just return this now. So if password is not equal to confirm, we return true, else we return false. So we are going to come right in here, and right before we allow this form to send whatever is the data to the server, we can check here and say if, or let's not do that. Let's first say, we're going to declare a variable here, say check password match, and this is going to be, or let's not call it check password match. Let's call this password match. So password match would be equal to check password match, and check password match is going to take fields the password, and the second parameter is going to be fields.confirm. And I'm going to say if password match, so basically if password match returns true, if it returns true, then what that means is that our password is not equal to our confirmed password. So if it returns true, then I'm going to have an alert here, JavaScript alert, and our alert is going to say password don't match, please check your password again. And right now I'm going to have to save this, get over to our browser, and let's just refresh that. Sometimes it takes a couple of seconds before the auto refresh kicks in. So I just prefer to refresh since sometimes it's faster. So now let's enter a name here. Let's call this Desmond. The email, let's say desmond@gmail.com. For the password, if I do password, and now let's do Desmond. And if I click here, don't use, you can see we have passwords don't match. Please check your password again. But the form, the data is still, even though it does that, it still gets to the end of this function. So to terminate it right in here, after this alert, we can just call a return statement, and that will terminate the function right here. Okay, so now that we have done this, the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to send this data to our server. Let me just save this. So for us to be able to send this data to our server, we would need to find a way to connect our application to our server or to our API. Now, we could basically just say spam a fetch API from here and just boom, send the data, receive it, and then blah blah blah, do whatever I want to do with data. But personally, I don't prefer that because that is not standardized. And aside from the fact that that's not standardized, it breaks the principle of DRY, do not repeat yourself. My own way of doing things is basically I like to have a service I call HTTP service, and that service kind of sets our global URL and also sets certain global functions for post request and for get request. And then whenever we want to perform request, of course we're not going to perform request here. We are going to have our services, our actions, and our reducers. So basically what happens is our services will be importing our global HTTP service that connects to our URL or that gets the parent URL from. That's basically the domain name. And then our services send the request to the server, get the response, then head to the action, and our action dispatch, and then the reducers then manipulate our state. And then within our components, we can now see the value of the whole operation. All right, so you may not really understand this unless we get into, actually doing what I just said now. So the first thing I want to do is within our source folder, all right, within our source folder, I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to call this folder services, right? Yep. And within our services folder, I'm going to create a new file here, http service.js. Within our http service.js, I'm going to have a class here called HTTP service. And this class is going to take 4 different functions and 1 global variable. And our global variable is going to be our URL. So for our URL, I already have our application set up on port 8081. So if I go to 8081, you're going to see that we have our Lumen API set up on port 8081. So what I can just do right now is I'm going to get in here and let me just get back here. I'm going to copy this guy here and paste that in here. So I'm going to get rid of this. So this is going to be our default URL throughout our application. Now heading back to the functions, the first function is going to be a function I will call post data. And this is going to be, of course, an asynchronous function that takes 3 parameters. The first parameter is the item. The second parameter is going to be what I call added URL. The third parameter is going to be a token ID, which by default is set to an empty string. So this is going to be a fat arrow function. And the first thing I want to do is I'm going to check, since we are using local storage, I'm going to check within our user's browser to see if local storage to get item, if actually the token ID exists. So basically, the essence of this is because within our post data, we are going to be setting certain request options. And one of the requirements for the request options is going to be our JWT token. And in our application, we are storing our JWT token inside of our browser. So having gotten our token from our local storage, we are now going to declare our request options here. So I'm going to say request options, and our request options is going to be a function which we have not created here, and this is going to be called post request options. So not to worry, we're going to create this function, and our post request function is going to take our token, and then it's also going to take our item. So basically the item is going to, for our post request, our item is basically going to be the body. So the body of data we are sending from our application down to our API, and this is going to then return what we are using. Actually, we are using fetch API in this series and not Axios. So this is going to return the fetch API, and fetch API has a couple of parameters. So the first parameter here is going to be the URL. So remember, we declared a global variable here called URL. So we're going to call this URL, and we are then going to concatenate the value of this global URL together with our added URL. So basically the added URL is going to look something like this. So let's say this is our global URL, this guy here. Then our added URL could be something like this, /user, right, /user/register. So let me use the plus sign here. So /user/register. So that's what our added URL actually would look like. All right, so our fetch API always returns a promise. So this is going to be a promise. So I'm going to call that then. And right here, our response is going to be converted to JSON. So the JSON. And that should do for our post data. Next up is going to be our get data function. So for our get data function, I'm going to copy our post data function. Stress myself a lot. So for our get data function, I'm going to call this get data. And our get data function actually doesn't need an item because get request, you don't pass anything to the body. So it just needs the added URL and then the token ID, JWT token from local storage. Then our request options here is only going to take our token right here. And then we're going to have our fetch API. And our fetch API here is going to take this. Oh my God, I made a mistake here. I will also need to pass the request options to here. All right, so it's going to take the URL as well as our request options here. All right, so now that we have set up our post data and our get data, we have to change this, not post request. We would have a get request options. So we will have to create our 2 unknown functions here, which is get request option and post request option. So I'm going to start with get request option. So for get request options function, it's going to be a fat arrow function, of course. It's going to pass our token, which is the parameter that we have passed for our get request option. And right here, we're going to declare a variable here called request options. And request options is going to specify our method. Our method is going to be get. The next is going to be the headers. And for our headers, we are going to set our token. So authorization should be, all right, so authorization should be the token. Then we also want to set our content type. And our content type is going to be application /JSON. And having declared our request options here, we are then going to return our request options. Yeah, why are we having this error here? Oh, sorry guys, this is not supposed to be within this frame. So let's place this here. So this is for our get request options. So let me just copy this, and I'm going to do this for our post request options. So for our post request options, let's change this to post request options. Post request options, it takes 2 parameters, the token and then the item we're going to be passing to the body. So I'm going to call the item here. The method here should be post. Our headers is going to remain the same. Authorization, token, content type, application /JSON. But then for our body here, we're going to JSON stringify the data, which is item. And we missed out on the comma here. And that should do for our HTTP service. Now we save this, and let me just head back to application. Let me close this guy. Okay, so everything looks pretty nice. Now let's get back in here. So now we have been able to set up our HTTP service, which kind of sets up the global scale of our application. The next thing we are going to do is we are going to actually make a request to our API. And we're going to do this within our services. So within our services, I'm going to create two folders here. One is going to be user, another is going to be not within user, sorry. Another is going to be admin. And right within user, we're going to create our auth service here. So this is going to be auth service.js. So right now we have our auth service.js. And since our auth service.js is going to make the request to our user registration endpoint, which is our /user/register, we would have to then import our HTTP service. And our HTTP service is going to come from HTTP service. And right after this, we are then going to create a function here. But this function will be exported, of course. I'm going to call this Signup Service. So this service is going to be responsible for signing up our users. And it's, of course, going to be a fat arrow function that takes a credential, which is basically the data, which is the fields data that's coming in from here, our fields data which are logged into the console here. All right, so within here, we're going to create an instance of our HTTP service. And since it's a class, we'll need to use a new keyword. And next up is we're going to declare our added URL. So I'm going to call this signup URL. And our added URL is going to be /user/register. And then this is going to be our HTTP request. We'll have to call one of our functions here. And since we are performing a post request, we're going to call post data. So http.post data, and of course our post data takes to 3 parameters, if I remember. Yep, it takes the item, the added URL, and the token ID. We're only going to be passing 2 parameters here because our third parameter is optional. And the only time our third parameter becomes really useful to us is if the user is authenticated. But right now the user is not authenticated, so even if we do local storage get item, we don't really have anything to pass in here as our token alias. All right, so we are just going to pass our credentials and then our sign up URL. And of course this returns a promise. And for this, we're going to have our data, which is our response. And then here we'll have our catch, just in case if we have any error. And for our errors, we are going to log them to the console so that we can see them for ourselves. And we are also going to return the error. Also, we are also going to log to the console our data. So console.log data. And then we are also going to return our data. So right now I'm going to save this, and we have been able to connect to our API, and we have been able to register the user, and we have also been able to get a response, which is the data we are returning in here. So for us to be able to get our React application to know that we have been able to get the data, we would have to dispatch an action, and this is where Redux comes into the whole play. All right, so now what we are going to do now is we are going to create some files, and those files are going to be within our store. So let's get into our store first. There's a store here, and of course we already have an actions folder and a register folder, and I'm sure we did create this in one of the first videos. If you don't have an actions folder, you can go ahead and create an actions folder and then a register folder. So right in our actions folder, I'm going to create a new folder here, and this folder is going to be called admin. And I kind of have this problem where I struggle to create a new folder. If I try to create a new folder here, and what I can basically do is I'm just going to get my terminal, and then I'm going to move into YouTube multi-auth, and then I'm going to move into source, and then move into store, and then actions, and right within actions I'm going to make a directory called user. So yep, we have admin and then we have user. So remember, we are actually working towards registering a user. So what I'm going to do now is right within this user folder, I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to call this auth. And within auth, I'm going to create a new file, and that file is going to be called auth actions.js. So within our auth actions, we are going to be dispatching our actions. So the first thing I want to do within our auth actions is to import our services. So this is going to come from services user auth service, and we want to import signup service. We're now going to create a new function here. We're going to call this function signup action, and our signup action is going to take our credentials basically. All right, and then we are going to return our dispatch, which is a function And right in here, we can then start dispatching our events. So the first event I'm going to dispatch here is going to be what I call restart auth response. So restart auth response. And this is supposed to be an object. All right, so the essence of this is just to clear whatever is the value of the state before the request. And the next up is we are then going to set the value of our state to loading. So by calling our type of loading, our action of loading, this is just going to display something while we wait for response from our API. So the next up then is going to be our sign-up service. So our sign-up service takes our credentials and also returns a promise. So our promise is going to then take our response. And right in here, we're then going to say if response that has a property. So basically it has a property of success. So basically it has a property of success, and the success property is equal to true, which means that the user action was successfully completed. Then we want to dispatch an event, and dispatch an action, actually, sorry, an event. And this is going to be called sign up success. And we're going to pass our response here. Then next up, if we also have this response of success, but then our response.success is false, we want to basically dispatch another action here, and that action is going to be sign up error. So sign up error, and then we're going to pass our response here. And then last of them all, which is going to come in here, just in case if we encounter any random error within our application, we are then going to dispatch an event, and that event is going to be of type. That event is going to be code error. We're going to call this code error and just pass our error. Okay, so now that we have successfully been able to write our actions, I'm going to save this. And in the first video, we actually had to create reducers. We had to create, I think it was auth reducer we created here. And the reason why we created the auth reducer was because if you create your root reducer without an auth reducer, React will always throw an error when you are working with Redux. All right, so what I'm going to do now in our root reducer is, you see all these actions that we have been able to define here, all these actions we have been able to dispatch. I'm going to manipulate our state based on the actions. And so we're going to kick off with the first reducer we created within our actions. The first action we dispatched here, which is restart auth response, have a case here, and that case is going to call restart auth response. And our restart auth response, we're going to then return our destructured state. So, and then we would then set, of course we had a, okay, we'll call this user auth response. So we'll then set the value to user auth response, which is going to be an empty string. So basically you can see what this just does is restart whatever was the value before in the state to an empty string. And so the next one is going to be the loading. So we'll just call here loading, and this loading, we're going to have to return our destructured state, and then we'll just call our user auth response, and our user auth response is going to have the value of loading. And somehow I have a problem here. Why? Declaration of statements. Oh, let me see. Okay, yep. That's true. JavaScript and return statements. All right, so next up after our loading is going to be our sign up. So we're going to have our case of sign up success. And for our sign up success, it's going to we're going to return the structured state, and the user auth response will then be the value of our response. And I'm going to copy this and just duplicate this, and then I'm going to paste this here. This is going to be sign up error, and the next step is going to be code error. So I'm going to call code error here, and for code error we're going to just have a generic message because we don't really know what caused the problem. So we're going to say there seems to be a problem, please refresh your browser. Now of course we don't want our user saying whatever the error message may be. We want to show the user a custom error message, so we'll definitely have to kind of find a way to just drop in a generic error message, because we don't want the user to see the error message for something like this, because we are not the ones who sent this error message. All right, so we are missing something here. This is not just supposed to be the response, it's supposed to be the action itself, and then the response property of the action. So I'm going to call action dot response. All right, action dot response, action dot response. And right now I'm going to save this, and I'm going to get back to our register view. And right within our register view, we want to be able to use React Redux in here. All we just need to do is we just import use dispatch to dispatch events and use selector to select whatever state we want to access. And this is going to come from React Redux. And now that we have this imported, we are also going to import our action. And this is going to come from, we're going to go / we're going to go to store and then actions, user auth and auth actions. And right here, we're going to import signup service. Sorry, sign up action. Okay, so now that we have done this, next up is we're going to create instances within this function of our use dispatch and our use selector. And so I'm going to say const, I like to call mine dispatch for use dispatch, and this is going to be the instance of the use dispatch function. And for our selector, I'm going to create a value here, and I'm going to call this auth response. And we're going to use our selector to not just get our global state, but go straight to the property of the state that we are looking out for. So we're going to move into our state, and from our state, we're going to return our state, and not just our state. We are, let me go to our root reducer, not to make any mistake. So we're going to go to our state, we're going to get user auth, our state, our user auth, and then we are then going to get the last parameter, which is going to be this value here, user auth response. Okay, there's one more to dispatch our events. All right, so now that we have our state here as auth response, and we have also gotten our dispatch here to hold our use dispatch Redux function, we would now then dispatch an event in here whenever the register button is clicked. So I'm going to call dispatch, and this dispatch is going to dispatch our sign up action. And our sign up action actually takes our credentials, which is going to be our fields. So I'm going to save this right now. So if I head back to our browser, and now I'm going to enter a name here, say Ramson, an email of ramson@gmail.com. Password is going to be password. Confirm password is going to be password. And if I click on, let me clear the console. Click on register. Don't save. We have an error here saying it's not a constructor, and this is coming on line 7 of HTTP service. So quickly, let's head into signup service. And just go to sign up. Sorry, we call this our auth service. And to fix this error, if I'm correct, we're going to head back into here. And within this class, I think the reason why that error was showing was because, I hope I'm correct, but we forgot to export this. So we're going to export this as default. And so that when we import this way, it's not going to have any issue at all. Okay, so now let's head back to our browser. So now let's get a name here called Damian. An email here of damian@gmail.com. Password is going to be password. Confirm. If I click on sign up, you can see here that we have a message saying success of true, message registration completed, success. If I head back to our database and I just refresh that, you can see the new user that we just registered right now. All right, so we are sure that our application is sending our data and is saving perfectly as expected, but we want to be able to show the user a success message if it goes through, a failure message within the view of our application. And so to do this, we're going to get back to our register view here, and then we're going to import something very important here, which is called our display error message. And our display error message is one of our helper functions, display error right here. If I should go over to this display error message function, why is this not? Anyway, let me just go to helper, display error.js. Oh boy, okay, display yes. So our display error message here takes two parameters. It takes the error response and then it takes a div. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to come right in here, and right at the top here, I'm going to have two div elements. The first div element is going to be responsible for showing our error messages. So I'm going to call this auth error. And then the second div element is going to be responsible for showing our success messages, and I'm going to call this auth response. And for our auth response, I'm going to come here and say if auth response is not an empty string. Remember, we have auth response here, right here, auth response. Okay, so if auth response is not an empty string and auth response dot success is true, then we're going to have a function here which we are going to call success message, and that function is going to take our auth response dot message. Otherwise, if our auth response dot success is false, then we are going to call our display error message function here. And our display error message function takes the auth response with the error itself. And then, like I said, it takes the elements, the div elements in which we want to display the error message inside of. And we want to display the error message within this auth error here. We want to display our success message here and our error message here. So for that, I'm going to do document.query selector, and I'm going to call our auth error, which is this our error message here. Lastly is we're just going to return the auth response, the value of auth response. So if auth response is not an empty string and auth response the success is true, we want you to show a success message, otherwise show an error message. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a function here. Remember the success message? We're going to create that function in here, and our success message function is going to take a success message. And what our success message function is going to help us do is it's basically going to help us return HTML instead of just a regular string. And to be able to do this, we are going to have our div. And for our div, we're going to give our div a property here called dangerously set inner HTML. And the dangerously set inner HTML is going to then set our HTML to be a string in here. And I know some persons say, well, this is not so good, this is not safe. But the truth is that as long as you're the one who is controlling whatever is being sent, that's okay. But if you're not the one, then that's when the problem comes in. Okay, so right now I'm going to have this here. And within our div here, we're then going to add some classes which we have already created in the past. So let me use single quotes here. So for this class, we're going to have alert. And because we're using single, we have to use double here. Alert success for success message, and we'll also add another class here called add padding just to give us some padding between the text. And let me just close this right now. And right here we're going to have this stem between the both of them, and then we'll have a plus sign here, and then we'll just have some spaces in between the string. And right in here we're then going to have our success message. And why are we still having this error here? And the reason for this error is because we're having two strings here, so let's just get rid of one. All right, so right now we've been able to return a success message, and because we are adding our own custom classes here within this div element, we will then use the set inner HTML property in React, and that would then set inner HTML of our auth response to be that value. So basically what is just happening here is if our auth response is not empty and auth response is true, then we want to call this success message function here. And basically what the success message function does is it sets the inner HTML property of our HTML here to be this class passing the success message, and you can see here alert danger, alert success, and then we just call that property here. Then if the auth response is false, basically we want to display this error message here, and our error message is we're going to use the display error message here. And basically what our display error message does is it's going to get whatever the error is, and we're going to have to pass this into this div that we created here responsible for error. That's why we're calling this document the query selector, and we're calling the error. Otherwise, just display the auth response. And if I were to go back to our display error here function, you can see here within our display error function, it says if the type of error is a string, then the inner HTML property of that div should be this, just the error response. But if it's undefined, the inner image property should be action failed error. But if it's actually an object, which is one of the major ways our errors are going to be coming, then we want to basically get the keys. Then we want to call this function error message and set inner HTML to be the value of error message. And what error message does is it loops through our string and then sets them to each of them to have individual values of the alert danger, bootstrap alert danger class, individual values for the string here. All right, so now let me just save this right now. And if I head back to my browser, we're having an error here saying attempted import display error message is not exported from display error. Let me see, display error message. Okay, display error messages. Display error messages. All right, so let's call this display error messages. Save that now, head back to our browser. And right now, if I were to register a new user, let's call this Emanuela. The email is emanuela@gmail.com. The password is password, confirm is password. Click on register, and right here we have registration completed successfully. All right, so let me try to register this user again, and we have an error here saying auth response is undefined. And so what do? We head back to application and scroll down here to our error, And this looks pretty good. I can't see any error here. Let's go to our auth actions. Oh boy, I've just seen it right here. So now let's just get this back here and get this come out of the way. Interesting things, right? All right, so I'm going to save this now, head back to our browser, and we just registered the user called Emanuela. So her email should be emanuela@gmail.com, right? So let me head back to my DB and be sure. So emanuela@gmail.com, and our password, just whatever. I click on register, and we still have undefined here. And if I get back to our console, we actually have an error object message which says email has already been taken. So to fix this, let's see display error messages. We declare the string here, we look through this. Oh boy, I think I've seen what is missing here. We have to return the string. All right, so now let's head back here, and let me try something here. Let's just do this. If I click here, yep, you can see your password must be 8 characters and above. All right, so if I were to have, say I was to enter another email here, emanuela@gmail.com, click here, you can see it shows us this email address has already been taken and your password must be 8 characters and above. Okay, now let's just head back to our application. And something I didn't like was the fact that our error response message was kind of taking up the whole width of our div. So we could very easily add a couple of styling to it. Of course, we already added a class here called addPadding here. So I'm going to copy this addPadding class. I'm going to head into our index.css and just add a couple of stylings to this guy here. If I save that and I head back to our browser and I just refresh this again, so let's try that. Let's see how this goes. Let's just enter a very short password. And we still have this. Why do we still have this? Let me see. Let's inspect this element. And we have addPadding or a single D, not a double D. So let's go back here and change this to a double D, double D, double D, double D. Save that addPadding. And let's just be sure this is a double D. Head back in here, get this to be an email, click on that, and yep, we have this looking pretty cool. If I were to try that email again, let me see, gmail.com. Yep, we have multiple error messages showing.